why responsible gun owners can't be among the most responsible Americans when it comes to dealing with and handling the coronavirus. So what were some of the things that you put in place and that the range put in place, as you engaged in this act of civil disobedience to do so responsibly?
Yeah, and again, it's important is I didn't sit in a basement and come up with what I thought was the right idea, right? I talked to the people that, as far as I'm concerned, some of the people I talked to will, 5 years from now be looked back on and be relied upon as the people who developed the best ideas around this, because they've been right in the heart of New York and they've been dealing with, they've lost friends, they've lost staff members, they've lost hundreds of patients. So in consulting with them, there's some obvious things. You mentioned like 50% reduction in capacity as far as what the government's saying. Now, one of the important things here was I'm not the kind of guy that wants to wait for the government, right? I've said for years, even as a trainer and as someone who advocates for responsible, we've talked about it on your shows, the idea that I don't think mandatory training is the way to go. I think it should be a responsibility issue that we in the community push forward. So the same thing here, the best practices for how to run a defensive firearms range in the times of Corona aren't going to be developed by the government. They're going to be developed by guys like me and other instructors working with medical professionals. So that's what we did. So reduced class size. First of all, you can see there's only about 6 people counting me in this picture. So we reduced the class size to about 50% of what it would normally be on that range. Normally we'd have 8 to 10 people on that range. We had 4 in one session, 5 in the other session. We ran 2 sessions. The other thing is we reduced the duration of time of the class. So we cut the classes. Normally I don't know when the last time I ran a half-day class was, but we ran sessions that were about half a day, 3.5 to 4.5 hours, counting the intro and the debrief. So there was, because duration and density both contribute to the coronavirus transmission. So we wanted to reduce the amount of time that students spent with each other or with me. We wanted to reduce the number of people in the room. And we also mandatory masks, as you can see in the picture, mandatory face covers for everybody involved. We had gloves optional because gloves, to me, as an instructor, they interfere, right, potentially with the interaction between the gun and the hand. So if you're not going to be shooting with gloves on, not necessarily when you're training with gloves on, it creates some extra, encumbrance on the student. I wore gloves and all of the range staff wore gloves. And the protocol was that anytime I took a student's gun to demonstrate something, or if I touched a student, I would burn those gloves, hand sanitizer, put on a new set of gloves. So I only had to do that about 3 or 4 times a session. Normally, I would touch students' guns quite often. I'd take a gun, I'd pick up a magazine off the ground, I'd adjust somebody's shoulders or hips or something. So I had to change my teaching protocols from that standpoint. You have to remember, an indoor range also, one of the other things to consider is the amount of airflow that's going through there. So it's really, in some ways, it's the perfect environment. So we reduced the classroom time. Normally, I might talk for 20 or 30% of the time in a class in the classroom. We spent all the time on the range because we wanted that ventilation. We wanted that air movement. Each student had their own individual area for their gear and for their magazine loading and all of that. And every student, when they came from the shooting line to or from loading, I didn't care which, we had them hit the hand sanitizer. So they did a round of hand sanitizer either before they loaded or after they loaded. And we made sure that the students were aligned parallel with the track whenever possible, which means we didn't, normally I would just have students gaggle up anywhere on a range when I'm lecturing, but we wanted to be really clear that I didn't want one student uprange, upwind as the vents pushing their, corona or their breath or their droplets or whatever onto other students. And then obviously we tried to maintain at least, 6, 8, 10 feet distance between each other. And I spent most of my time downwind from them because as the guy who's traveling around, as the guy who's dealing with multiple groups of students, theoretically, I'm the vector. So I had to make sure that I was, downwind from the ventilation as much as possible from them. We did take one outdoor break where we came out of the basement, out of the indoor range and out onto the street, took the masks off, got some fresh air. It was a beautiful weekend in New York as far as the weather goes. So we did do that. And I think those were the highlights. One thing that came up, you can see in this picture, I'm wearing a surgical mask. I actually had an N95 mask under that, but I had one of the vented ones. And for me, it was I've worn a lot of different face covers, a lot of different types of masks, respirators, all the different things. I've done videos on the differences and things like that. Again, all educated from the medical people. And I chose the vented one because I felt like it was going to let me breathe easier because I knew that during the day I would be having to project my voice to get through the mask, whatever I was wearing. And the one of the physicians that was there said, I understand what you're doing, but remember, because of that vent, you're probably only like 70 or 80% effective at containing your germs as you're throwing them out. So put a surgical mask over the vented N95. You'll still be able to breathe easier than a closed N95. You'll be able to project your voice, but you get that added redundancy of catching the droplets that are coming out through the vent. So those are some of the types of things why it was important for me to have the physicians there. And here's the cool thing. The range is now talking to the local government. They're probably going to be allowed to be open and to remain open. And one of the reasons is because of the way we did this. Because we didn't do it with signs in the street. We didn't do it in an antagonistic way. We didn't just say, it's nothing but a flu, throw our masks off and put 20 people in a basement range. We really tried to demonstrate with medical supervision and medical consultation that we want to do this in a way that mitigates risk. The number one responsibility of any firearms instructor is to not let your students get hurt. It's safety, right? It's mitigating the risks of a live fire range. Well, we've got some new risks. And obviously we're not getting into the politics of it. We're not getting into the flat earth hoaxer, theories. But to me, it doesn't matter. There's a perception in the world right now that I think is real, that there is a virus out there that can hurt a certain percentage of our students, can hurt their families. We should be responsible in all things we do, as you said, and gun owners are already inherently responsible. We've talked about this a lot, you and I personally and publicly, about the rights and responsibilities thing. And that's what we were doing. We were responsibly exercising our rights, including the right to run a business and not to be restricted from that. So I'm really proud of everybody that was involved, and I appreciate you helping me spread the word that this can be done responsibly.